Welcome back to another episode of Endurance Icons, where we sit down with individuals crushing it in the wide world of endurance sports. I'm your host, Mark Cullen, and today on the podcast, we got a super exciting guest. We got author, sports tech consultant, triathlon coach, including the coach of Ben Kanute, who recently went 7:37 to set the U.S. Ironman record at Challenge Roth recently. We got Jim Vance on the podcast today. How you doing, Jim?
Hey, I'm great, Mark. Thanks for having me. Heard a lot about your podcast and things, listened to some, and it's been pretty good.
Amazing. Well, I'm pumped to hop into all things kind of around your coaching philosophy today, because it aligns a lot with a lot of mine. So really excited for the chat today. But I figured it might be a fun spot to start. We are currently 2 days out from a big race coming up, the PTO US Open. How's Ben's recovery from Roth been going? And maybe give us a rundown of how you see the race playing out of it.
Sure. Oh man, I have honestly no idea how that race will pan out, just because first the start list keeps changing.
Yeah.
That's one reason. So, the dynamics of the race are hard to plan or know, but just because of so many guys coming in and out of the race. So, we thought, okay, when we lost, obviously we've lost Laidlow. And some, we thought, okay, we lost some guys at the front of the pack, the firepower, the Brownlee, the Martin Van Riels. And so for that, it was, it's been hard to know for sure what to expect. But then you add like Mark Dubrick, a Josh Hamburger, and suddenly now, okay, the swim's good, but how's the bike pack? So, we'll see how things go. I think, and this distance is still so new that we're still learning it. I'm still learning it, believe it or not. When I prepared him for Daytona, I think some of the things I recognized some mistakes. Daytona 2020, when we really kind of first attacked this distance against really high level competition. So that was a good learning experience, but we're still learning. And so his recovery from Roth has gone fairly well. I would say the first 2 weeks were probably a lot rougher than what he thought, just because he also had to come home. And, after you've been gone for 2 weeks, I try to give him some downtime, reconnect with his family, him to take some responsibilities off of his wife, Courtney. So he wasn't sleeping as well. It probably was not ideal recovery, but he had to balance that with happiness in his life and marriage and family. So, we just rolled with it and said, let's do what we can. I didn't feel that bad about it because of, I just saw Magnus Ditlev's post the other day that said that his recovery from Roth has been a little slow too. So,
oh yeah,
not too surprised.
Amazing. Well, yeah, Ben's done some amazing stuff over the last, I would call it close to 9 months or so, ever since 70.3 Worlds, where he kind of had that kind of breakthrough comeback there, and then Arizona, and then Roth. What are some of the key elements that you think really went into kind of overcoming some of those maybe tougher years that he had over the last few to really getting back to that top level?
Well, and that's the funny thing. I think a lot of people, he's got a big spotlight on him, right? Mm-hmm. So sometimes short periods without success can seem eternal, and it's like, so everybody's like, wow, Ben Kanute got second at the World Championships. Can you believe that? Well, yeah, I can, because he did that, 5 years prior. So, but to everyone, that's a super long time. He struggled last year. And some of that honestly dealt with the early part of the season with a lot of sickness and things. And we just weren't able to get the base that we wanted. And then he went into Oceanside, and he actually performed pretty darn well. And I thought, okay, maybe we're fine. And then he had left ITU Olympic racing. The pursuit of the Olympic Games, that is. So for him, he really wanted to see some wholesale changes and a real different approach in the chase for more 70.3 specific PTO type work. And so we made some big changes, and we changed our whole model, and it sucked. It just sucked. It didn't work. He and I were disconnected a lot. I probably got away from some things that I knew, trying to change so much. And then after Alcatraz, he and I had a very hard conversation. In fact, I recall telling him, "Hey, man, I got to ask you, am I fired?" Like, and he said, no. And then, but he's like, "I want to get this right, Jim." And so we had a very honest conversation about, okay, what are the decisions we've made? I never put it all on Ben, but I certainly want him to be the driver of everything. I feel like that's where I work best. If you're an athlete who needs me to yell at you to perform well, I'm not your coach. Like, if you need me to be an a-hole to you, that's not who I am. That's not my personality. I like to deal with highly motivated individuals that want to execute at a high level, and that's Ben, and that's why this relationship has worked. And so when we made the change, we kind of went back to what worked, some defined periods that we knew were tried and true. And then all of a sudden, his racing through the summer wasn't great, but he kept seeing improvement in training and still in the race numbers. And so at that point, we realized, he was like, well, it's hard to walk away from something that I see continually gets better. We just wanted it to get better sooner. And then, and I don't necessarily know that it really helped him that he went to the Collins Cup and got teamed with Hayden Wild and Christian Blumenfeld.
It's it's a tough draw.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, well, here's the standard. Well, if his best standard's, that close, if he's off that, it's tough. So yeah, it seemed like a really long time that he wasn't having success, but I think COVID had a lot to do with that. Right before COVID, in 2019 was a career year for Ben. A career year. We started off the year in April rather. And if I go back to 2019, and I'm not a guy who prepares him for the early part of the year. I don't prepare my athletes for the early season. I prepare for the time of the year that matters most, and try to get them to be able to race through that. And he won 3 races in 22 days that started with Oceanside. Then he went to Barbados and won an ITU draft legal sprint distance a week later. And then a week later won St. Anthony's non-draft Olympic distance.
Versatile, holy.
Yeah, so you're talking 3 different types of racing, 3 different distances over 22 days. And then he went on to get second at Chengdu World Cup in a super sprint, which was a huge, huge race for him. He won Alcatraz right after that. Then it's like everything that we had was coming together for 2020. The plan was working. And our original plan had been, Ben was not going to chase points and try to get in the top 30 in the world. He was going to leave that to the younger guys, the newer guys. And he said, look, Jim, let's just go and show that we're one of the best super sprint mixed relay athletes in the world. And it's hard to believe that we'll get left off the team if that's what we can do. And so it was a great strategy, and it seemed to be really working. And then all of a sudden, Morgan Pearson kind of exploded and really started to perform well. Kevin McDowell, tip my hat to him. He really started to figure it out. Everything kind of connected all his dots, stayed healthy, had a great campaign, and both those guys ended up Olympic medalists. And then also, Matt McElroy continued to show consistency. So when we set that strategy out, it was a much different landscape, especially post-COVID. And then you take into the fact the U.S. lost one of their 3 spots for the Olympics. So it was only down to 2. So at that point, I think a lot of people, it's with COVID and then Daytona, Ben didn't maybe perform that well. That big Daytona race that year of COVID where all eyes were on it, I don't know how many people know this, but Ben actually missed the birth of his daughter.
Oh my!
He got on the plane, had his mom there just to be with his wife and make sure. He got on the plane took off. She immediately went into labor. And started, and it was a long labor. I say immediately, it didn't take long, but before he landed in Florida, she was already in labor. And so what do I do? Do I bag this race? This is the only race of 2020, you have to realize, the only one. And we prepped for it and everything. And he stayed there and decided, okay, she's got support. He had his dad with him. And yeah, and the race didn't go that great. I think he got 18th, 19th, maybe 20th, somewhere around there. But, that's one of those where as a coach, I just kind of put my hands in the air. I don't know. Like, what do I tell an athlete who just missed the birth of his first child?
Yeah, not much you can say.
Don't worry, you'll get them next time. Let's go race now. like that doesn't work. So, I can only imagine, what that was like for him. So I think there were some things that happened. Everything really did seem to go well. I thought in 2019, man, we're really moving here. Everything's going to come together. And then the pandemic and 2021 was a bit of the world kept changing, Oh, well, now the criteria is this. Okay, now's that. Now, okay, this race is going to happen. Okay, now it's not going to happen. You got to go. Okay, the protocols of safety over here are this. The protocols are this to travel this. It was so ridiculous that I laugh. I mean, I'm amazed we got through it. What we did accomplish. So
yeah, that's wild.
There you go.
Well, man, it's been a fun journey to follow, and we're definitely rooting for Ben coming up. What does the rest of 2023 look like for him, other than the PTO race coming up? 70.3 Worlds in there as well?
Yeah, August is going to be a busy month. Really busy. It's Milwaukee, Singapore.
He's doing Singapore too. Whew.
Yep.
Spicy schedule. It's going to be awesome, though.
It is 3 races on 3 different continents. So
well, he's shown he can do it before. You just talked about that crazy schedule, so he's got a track record of it.
Now, the longest of those was a half, and the shortest was a sprint, so it's a little bit easier, but there was a lot of travel. This is in 4 weeks. Yeah, we'll see. How this goes. We tried to structure the year though in a way that will make sense. He's only chosen races that he's really motivated about. We've eliminated a lot of other races. He did not go to Challenge Miami. He focused on Oceanside because he has a home there. And it's easy drive from Arizona, so it works. So he did Oceanside, he did Ibiza with the PTO European Open, he did Roth. This is only going to be his 4th race of the year, and it's August. Like, that is not normal in his career. But that's one of the things we learned through this whole process, especially coming out of St. George, was when we basically said, screw it, we're not good enough to really race at the highest level at the front. Let's just train through these races. Suddenly he started to realize, man, when I really put a lot of good training together, like, I'm pretty good. So, he left St. George. After the St. George race, he told me, Jim, that's what I want in my career. That's what I want to be able to do. Just show up, race, be a part of it, and mix it up with the best guys in the world at that level. And that, to me, in races that matter. And so that's what we've turned our attention to. And that's the way it kind of structured too, is we were able to focus on a lot of lower volume build up to Ibiza, be prepared. I got him off Ibiza, and then we did a volume block to prep for Roth. So it's kind of interesting. People are like, oh my goodness, he's 737 is just his second one. It really was only on about 6 weeks of specific work. That's all it was. And I even had to build into that and work. So our hope is that, I say hope, I mean the plan is that he's carrying enough strength from all that. He got his recovery. We did some sharpening. He's done a lot of heat acclimation. Hard not to when you live in Phoenix at this time of year, and they're 117 degrees Fahrenheit or something average high for, I don't know what, a number of weeks. And and now he's now it's basically rest and race in the month of August. And then he's going to shut it down, go to his brother's wedding. And then we're going to figure out the rest of the year.
And the Kona build begins.
Pretty
Not
much.
that early.
Pretty much. So
that's going to be exciting. Yeah, pumped to see him there as well next year. You got a long runway leading up to that.
Yeah, we do. As he says, probably the longest Kona build in history. I don't know about that, but back in the day, they used to have some long builds. You could just pick that race. You didn't have to qualify if you were a pro. You just enter. So yeah, he's going to have that, and yeah, I'm excited about it. I mean, I feel like we know what works for him especially, and we got the right team around, and he just keeps getting better. I was laughing. I told somebody his very first 70.3 half marathon, believe it or not, was a 120. And yeah, and now
Oh my
St.
gosh.
In St. George, he ran 111 on a much harder course. Like it's like that's and okay, you can say super shoes, but super shoes ain't getting you 8 minutes, 8+ minutes. They're not that good. Those would be really super.
So so was that purely because it's kind of an interesting one. You say we had Jackson Laundry on, and he actually talked about a very similar progression, and he said he actually like almost had that top end speed the whole time. It was just unlocking the actual run off the bike to be able to get to full capacity. And like I'm sure he made some of those like overall fitness gains, but did Ben already have that speed, or was it purely like fitness gains that he made over that time, do you think?
Oh, I think Ben's a good athlete. I mean, if you just look at fast twitch muscle fiber
Mm-hmm.
ability, he's pretty high. What he has is an incredible ability to stay near his top. And his top maybe isn't as good as some of these other guys, but he's really able to stay near it for a lot longer. I think that's one of the reasons why he's so good at mixed relay, because he can just stay on the gas,
Mm-hmm.
and it works well for him. The I think it's been a lot of mobility, a lot of specific strength, a lot of supporting him, and a lot of just muscle memory with increased run volume. He, believe it or not, I like the largest mileage I want to say Ben's ever done under me has been about 70 miles in a week running. So that's not even 80K. Or no, sorry, that no, it's no
Like
80,
110 or so.
50. So yeah, about 110. Sorry, about
Yeah.
110. So, but that's like the highest. We're not talking, a whole lot
Mm-hmm.
as a whole. It's just been the consistency, and yeah, I think for Ben, Matt Pendola did a lot. Matt really kind of helped connect some dots, turned on his nervous system, built some better coordination. Um, that I think's been. Uh, I mean, I've told Matt he's in my in my mind he's like a legal performance enhancing drug, because when I bring him an athlete, it's amazing how things just change. So, as long as the athletes stick with it and do what he says, it's been pretty cool to see some of the things that have happened. And believe it, at one of the first places we see it too, when I know it's working, is because athletes' swims improve like that.
Mm-hmm.
Just their swim, just in a week's time, week to 10 days, an athlete is swimming at a new level, just because everything is just so turned on, the whole nervous system, and they're just so much sharper and ready and able to manage a lot of stimulus better. And so yeah, I mean, I say that because that's been my experience. Somebody else may not have that experience, but I coach in a very different way, where I really try to be a lot more targeted with my stimulus and stress loads, and I look for a lot of ways to reduce that injury risk. Probably the coolest and most proud statistic for me with Ben is 7 years, 0 missed race starts.
Wow.
7 years, one injury, and that injury happened in the last race of the year, at Super League, running through the sand in one of those like swim bike run, swim bike run, swim bike runs. And I think he stepped wrong and tore his adductor, and that was like his seventh race in 12 days or something, like 10 days. Like it was something pretty high intense with Super League and what they were doing. So yeah, it's probably not a surprise that that would injure him. But other than that, I mean, that's not to say we haven't had setbacks here or there where Okay, we got to maybe not run for a day or two or something. But I mean, we never have something that takes us out for a long time, ever. Knock on wood.
Yeah, that's huge. Especially, I feel like so many of those ITU athletes that are coming over to some of the long distance stuff have just been so beat up. You think of like an Alistair Brownlee, what he put his body through for so many years, and now he comes to long distance and he can't make a start line.
Exactly. And I think that's so overlooked.
Mm-hmm.
The best ability is availability.
I like
I mean,
it.
that's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, okay, go beat yourself down. That's why when I first met Ben, one of the first things I asked him was, okay, how many races did you do last year? This is when we were talking about coaching. And he's like, I did like 20 or so. I'm like, okay, how many did you feel good at? He said 2. He thought about it for a minute and then told me 2. And I'm like, dude, you are doing your competitors a favor, because you should not be showing up to a start line feeling like crap. How do you express the fitness? Like, you're doing all this work and you can't even go out and express it. What good's the work then? And I said, we need to come up with a strategy and a consistent approach into racing that lets you leverage the work you're doing. We need to tone down the work you're doing and let consistency really help us. And I'm like, dude, you're extremely talented. You went to the Olympics. You're a front pack swimmer. You're really good. So why are you the one taking all the risks? Let's let all these other guys take the risk. They're the ones that got to beat you. So he bought into that. And, and for the most part, it's worked. Now, we've had a few guys, like I said, Morgan Pearson kind of came up through, Kevin McDowell, and in the long course side, you've got, on the American side, Sam Long. But I mean, you haven't seen a lot of guys jump up. And that's because it's hard. It's really hard. And so when you're in that position, I see so many athletes, they're in a great position and they take all this needless risk. It's like, what are you doing? Like, why? Like, we got to do, we got to go to the track first time, or we got to do 12 400s. Why? 6 will do. 8 will do. Do 12 in 3 weeks. Build to that. Take your time. Like, this is how you get hurt. And then you're back here in 3 weeks trying to do this again, and you're worse,
So is there some, like when you talk about keeping people away from injury, is there some like really core principles you have around, like, is it, like you said, making sure that people aren't going to max really in every workout, like that 1 rep more kind of rule? Or is it just that like really slow progression? Or is it something to do with maybe the feedback cycles that they're giving you? What are some of your kind of key anchors there that really allow you to modify that to keep an athlete far away from that?
Well, first of all, progression. Like, I think so many athletes, they go out, I got to train for this half Ironman. So I got to go out and I got to do, if I want to break 3 hours, that means I got to go out and do 3 hours of hard work every weekend, every Saturday. So, no, you don't.
Or straight to 4:15 per K every single time right away. I need to go to pace.
It's like, let's go out. Let's put in 3 to 4 hour ride. Then let's get in about an hour of work. The next week, let's see if we can go to 90 minutes. The next week, let's see if we can go to 2 hours. And if we can't, well, then it's time to reassess what you think you're capable of. Because clearly, if you can't do this for 2 hours, you ain't going to hold it for 3.
Mm-hmm.
And, okay, I think that's the problem, for so many athletes today, is they believe they're here and they try to train there and they're not there. And, it's like, well, I want to get there. I have to train that way. No, you got to progress to there.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't go on your timeline. It goes on the body's timeline. So you gotta listen to the body and see what it's telling you, see how how it responds. And I have one key checkpoint that I give myself. And that is when I feel like I've got a block of work done for an athlete, I'll give them a 2-day recovery, and then I'll do kind of a test on that 3rd day. And if that third day, in my opinion, should be a home run. If it's not a home run where they've absolutely just killed it, knocked it out of the park, great workout, great numbers, clear improvement, they're super stoked and excited, then we're doing too much. 2 days should be enough recovery to get back to work, or you're doing too much. What's too much? I just saw a video the other day of a guy who did really well in a half Ironman, and 3 days later was back at it, hammering a workout. And I'm like, okay, if you can recover well in 2 days from a half Ironman performance, and that third day you can get a home run, I'm impressed.
Or you didn't go hard enough in that 70.3.
Well, yeah, you'd have to ask them, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't get that. And that's one of the other areas I take risks. If I'm asking if this athlete is ready or not, there's probably a problem. I should know that they're ready. Like, yep, we've rested, we have success. What happens? Athletes are too impatient. Coaches, so many coaches are too impatient. They squeeze this in, and they coach every athlete as though they're all equally coming into a workout ready for the same amount of success. And that's just not true. There are so many things in athletes' lives, from athlete to athlete, and in their approach. I just had another pro, and they had a pretty good race, but I had to have an honest conversation with them. And I'm like, come race week, they go silent. They just dark on me. And they are so busy, and there's so much chaos in race week. I can tell all the subjective things don't get recorded, because I do subjective wellness every day, 10 metrics that I want athletes to do, because then I can visually see the stress and recovery cycle of an athlete. I can see their stress loads. I can see effective stress in their daily life, its effect on their training and their recovery and how they feel. I can get a sense of their emotional well-being, their self-confidence, all these things from these subjective wellness things that I use. And so when I have this with this athlete and suddenly those disappear, okay, I know something's up. And this athlete is a mess going into races. And so we had to have an honest conversation. We got to slow race week down. There's too much happening. Okay. You're trying to squeeze in too much. You're procrastinating certain stuff. You're squeezing in all this other stuff. So you're trying to get done before you leave, maybe more days at work. Well, because I'm taking these, I got to shift. I got to do it. No, let's not do that. Let's start 2 weeks earlier, add a day in of work for 2 weeks. So that way we can balance this, and we can make race week specific and supportive for you to go out and perform well. And that was a conversation that we had to have, because I think there's so much to racing and performance that has nothing to do with training. It has 100%. To do with everything else we do, and the way we live our lives, the relationships of the people that we have with the people around us. And so, I had to have that conversation. And this athlete's doing wonderful, by the way. This athlete is feeling great, sky high. But I had to remind them, it's because when they started with me, it was dark. I was a little worried about this athlete. And so now they're like, hey, everything's great, so the whole world's bright and sunny. Like, no, we're not to the bright and sunny world yet. Like, the sun's just starting to come up. All right, so let's slow it down. Let's slow race week down. Let's have our plan. Let's execute it. And I also make my athletes write out race plans, and I read, and I have specific things that I want them to do with those race plans. And those race plans, they tell me a lot about the mental approach of the athlete, where their focus is, what they believe they can do, what they don't believe they can do, everything. So, yeah, it's funny. Most people think I'm just a data guy and numbers guy, and it's like, that's not really the case at all.
Those subjective things are so cool. Like, I feel like I also, as you were saying that, I was like, can you fully trust in their athletes' feedback all the time on the subjective side? Or do you rely on some things like HRV or things like that to support that?
You're hitting the nail on the head. If you can't have honest feedback and data, then you got to have conversations.
Yeah.
Where are we? What are we doing? Why did you tell me this when this is what happened? Like, okay, you said you're really stressed. You didn't mark that in your subjectives. Oh yeah, I didn't. I probably wasn't honest about this. Okay, well, I go back to it. If I got to be an a-hole to an athlete to get them to be successful, I'm not the best coach for them. So it's about the athlete holding themselves accountable and saying, here's what's important to me, and letting me into the world. It requires some vulnerability on an athlete's part, because I'm coming in and I'm looking under the hood. I'm seeing what's really going on. And it's, I'll be honest, some athletes I haven't been successful with. I haven't solved their puzzle. Some athletes I've had to say, this is a puzzle I don't want to solve. Sorry, I'm out. Like this, like you're not, like, again, like if they're not motivated enough, and I say motivated enough, I mean, it probably sound like a dictator here, like your whole life should be triathlon. No, it's like we all have lives outside the sport. It's about, but when it's time to do the work, we got to be serious and structured and focused, because that's, if you're not, then it leaks in everything. It leaks into your subjectives. It leaks into your how hard you'll push yourself in a race. It's just, it becomes pretty clear. As Chelsea Sodaro told me, how you cut your carrots is how you live your life. She told me that in Roth.
Well, I was just going to say, one of my favorite quotes when you're saying you don't need to be obsessed with triathlon, but how you do something is how you do everything. So how they're showing up here is how they're showing up in their life. So exactly. Did you know you're also a life coach, Jim?
I feel like it sometimes. Trust me.
I wanted to ask a question around that 2-day recovery rule.
Sure.
So is it rest that your athletes take, or is it light recovery? Like, what do those 2 days look like?
I would say for the average athlete, it's one full day off, followed by a day of they would be considered like a joke amount of activity.
Okay.
Like, this is barely like a 1 hour easy spin, a 30-minute run, a half-hour swim. I think to most triathletes, that's a very light day. Yes, maybe you're a little busy because you got to go to the pool, you got to try to squeeze in the ride, squeeze in the run, but for the most part, the load from the training is light, but it just turns the nervous system back on so that, okay, you're prepped and ready for the next day. Because if you go 2 days off entirely, well, now the nervous system starts to shut down. You're not as coordinated. I have some athletes who are like, don't give me a day off, Jim. Do not. I do not do well with that. And despite my desires, I respect that and say, okay, well, but then I'm going to give you days like that. So, little things like strides too can do wonders. Some pulling in the pool, just going to recruit more muscle fiber for simple movements. So you do that. Next thing you know, you're pretty ready and the nervous system's turned on, and you go out and you add a little caffeine and
I got caffeine pills late like recently, and they are glorious. I'm like flying in workouts.
In my opinion, it's the best it's the best performance enhancing drug in the world. Caffeine.
You know what? I agree. And I actually think it's different than coffee, because I love my morning cup of coffee. But we recently had a track race. And before that, I had my cup of coffee and I took one additional caffeine pill. And I can tell you, I felt very different than if I would have had 2 cups of coffee. Like, it was incredible. I'm right there with you. It's very performance enhancing.
Yes. Especially if you cycle it right.
Yes.
As long as you're not using it at a high level on a regular basis, you spike with it, it'll do something for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. So your athlete has taken those 2 days, and then you mentioned that they come back and they do a test. What do your fitness tests look like?
You know what? Believe it or not, I wouldn't describe it as a test. I would just describe it as a workout that's specific to what we're working on, what we've been working on. So,
okay.
With that, in my opinion, every key session is a test. Really. I don't call them that. I've actually gotten away. I can't remember the last time I had an athlete do an FTP test. It's been years. It was well before COVID. I stopped because I pretty much could tell, and this is your threshold. We're in this ballpark. I pretty much know it. And when I look at things, when I look at an athlete's data, I mean, heck, when I watch an athlete race, I can generally tell you their threshold power.
Interesting.
And things, just years of that, and generally threshold paces and stuff like that. I can get a sense. So, if then I just follow the numbers. So if let's say we've been working on 70.3 biking, or 70.3 everything, we're trying to get better. Well, that next day I'd probably have a big 70.3 bike workout followed by a transition run that has some type of intervals at, their goal pace or their goal intensity. And that should go really well. And they should walk away from that pretty fired up and excited. Mm-hmm. And if they don't, then it's my fault. If they've done everything that I've asked them to do, it's my fault. And I take responsibility and I say, okay, here's what I've learned. Here's the changes I'm going to make going forward. We have that discussion and then we go. And that's pretty much, how it works. Because that in itself is the test, as long as it's reflective of what you've actually been working on. So if, with Ben, there were phases where we'd come out of a real 1,500 meter run focus, especially when he was doing short course stuff, really trying to get that. So we might do, just another workout that we had done maybe earlier, but maybe the next progression. And if that goes well, and he was like, boom, then I'm like, let's just keep riding this train. Then we're on the right track. It's hard to go broke making a profit, right? So
I love all these one-liners. This is great.
Yeah, I'm like
t-shirts made.
Yeah. I want to dive in a little bit then to your coaching around the 3 disciplines. So around swimming, what sort of is the frequency and the volume of the swim within your coaching? And do you have any sort of specific drills that you use to really drive home that form?
Well, everything I do is goals-based for every athlete. So, Kanute has a very simple rule. We just, you'll notice I'm a big rule guy, apparently. We just try not to be out of the water 3 days in a row. As long as every third day we're in the water, we're good. We know he's not going to lose anything. And as we get closer to events, we'll obviously increase the density and based upon what he feels like. So a perfect example is coming off Roth, he was really like, Jim, we like these PTO races, these swims are no joke. Like we got to up the swim. I got to have my get out speed. I got to be sharp. So, okay, we upped that and did that. Annie Fuller's a young lady I coached from, she's focused more on Olympic, rankings, stuff like that, draft legal. With her, she's swimming 6 days a week. I have an age grouper who's, going to Finland and he swims 3 days a week. So, but he's a busy guy. He's an attorney, in the biotech area. So his life can be crazy and we just do what we can. And in fact, his swims are just, hey, let's go to Masters at UC San Diego here. Just to have a schedule and let him work on certain things, and it's long course. So, he's not going to win the worlds in his age group. He's pretty happy, but he really enjoys this, does want to improve. And we take his feedback from how those are going and adjust, but it's not any sort of set rule. I try not to have a template that I force on athletes. I try more to learn the athlete and kind of build from there.
Well, that's the beauty of personalized coaching, right?
Should be.
And you mentioned your athletes that are remote or are not in the same location. In terms of swim form, how do you manage that? Just especially because the form is so much of it.
Oh, it is. And I try to get some video. I think one of the things that I always kind of have to tell an athlete too when we start is, okay, let's slow down. Swim form is probably one of the later things I get to, just because it is such a small part of the race. And then, it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of focused work. And you got to be honest about the return that you're really going to see.
Yeah. 100%.
So especially when an athlete starts with me, I'll be honest, it's not at the top of the list. It really isn't. Now with Annie Fuller, very different story. She had to make the swim. The swim was absolute priority. And so she moved here. I was working with her 3 days a week on deck. And her swim has just taken off. So that's been great. So again, going back to that, it depends on the athlete and their goals and what we need to do. So, but generally, when I do get to that point, it's okay, send me some video. Let's look, and believe it or not, I'll do it here over a Zoom, and I'll just point out certain things. I'll demonstrate a few certain things. I have a very simple approach to swimming, technically speaking. I just believe a lot in length. That's probably the number one thing. Staying long in the water can just do wonders, elevate you, give you lift in the water. And that tends to solve a lot of problems right off the gate, right off the bat. So yeah, I would say it generally is a few months before I address that with an athlete. I say that too, because generally I tend to get hired during the season where I don't have time to go back to too many basics like that. It's like, hey, Jim, I've hired you and I have these 3 big races coming up in, 8 weeks, 12 weeks and so. It's like, all right, well, let me do the ones I can really show. So I tend to try to do that. If I have time with an athlete at the beginning of the year with a long base, or maybe I'll come off that, I'll be like, okay, it's clear we got to work on your swim now. Now we've got the runway to do so. Let's do it. That tends to be how that works.
Well, jumping to the sport that I imagine you do lean in on if you only have about 8 weeks. I know that the bike is a significant part of any triathlon. Love to hear a little bit about your philosophy around the bike coaching.
Oh, well, man, if it's, again, I kind of go back to goals based. Okay, what's the goal? Because obviously what I feel that the athlete needs is going to be based on what they're actually trying to accomplish. You want to accomplish a slot to the worlds, okay? That's probably a lot different if you're a 65-year-old male or female than if you're a 25-year-old male or female. So you really want to look at it and understand, okay, based upon the goals, what's the demands of competition to be successful at that goal? Mm-hmm. And then if I can define it, okay, we need to be able, it's real simple with Kanute. Most 70.3s are a 2-hour bike ride. And I'll be honest, he doesn't do 2 hours of 70.3 work throughout most of the season. Historically, he hasn't. Now this year's a little different, but historically, I've only had him do about 90 minutes of work throughout the season, show up and he'd race. And I would just trust that he could get that other half hour based upon what we had done. And then when we got into the peaks, the builds like St. George, Chattanooga, Nice, 70.3 Worlds, when that was there, all those, that's when I upped the volume and created more. I do feel that the single hardest thing to do in all of sports is to pick a day on the calendar and say, on this day right here, I'm going to show up and I'm going to have the best fitness I've ever had, and I'm going to execute to express it. That's the toughest thing to do. I don't care what sport it is, basketball, NBA, NFL, whatever. Like, we're going to be at our best, peaked and sharp, ready to face the best competition on this day at our best. And that's really what I find that I'm really pretty good at. And the way that I've done that is by slowing things down, being patient, taking a progression, and building to something so that athletes are confident, excited, healthy, and the execution's clear, because you're going to make mistakes in training. It's going to happen. You're going to make mistakes in coaching. It's going to happen. The thing is, do you put yourself in a position where you can't rebound from those? Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. And I always try to keep myself in that position with my athletes, where if we have a setback, we're okay. We can get back on track pretty quick. Some things, bike crashes, falls, other acute things that have nothing to do with training, they happen. But if you can do that as a whole with athletes and play a longer game, you tend to have more success. They tend to have more enjoyment, believe it or not, because of that success.
And I think your 10 metrics play such a role in that. When I was just reflecting on that whole idea of showing up on that one day as your best self. You as a coach can do absolutely everything right, but if they have environmental factors that are beyond your control, whole host of things that could completely upend all of that. Like, it's so hinging on so much more than just sport. So I just think it's fantastic that you look at the whole picture, which is going to help you become that master of picking that day, or it at least helps you sort of balance the hundreds of factors that go into what makes that day a success.
Sure. Well, let me ask you guys a question. What really tends to stop an athlete from being successful?
Oh man. So many different things.
I would say probably a majority of it is things that are not training related. At least for me personally as an athlete. Like I look at, if I am at a work event and I wear heels, or I walk too far in, pretty shoes that give me a blister, or I have work stress, or I don't sleep, or, I have like 2 extra drinks in a night, or etc. I can train as much as possible, but all of that will upend all of the work I've done. Or it could be, Kara Goucher was out for a season because she dropped a battery on her big toe and it broke. Like it's all these small things that you can't see coming that I think is the biggest. But how about you?
Yeah, I would say 100% with my athletes. Like it's rarely the actual training that gets them. It's mostly that epic hike they went on with their family or something after doing a 30K long run in the morning. And then they're like, why am I broken? Because you suddenly did 50K on the day.
Let me ask you this though. When an athlete's going well, how often does that type of stuff tend to happen? Like when an athlete knows that they're fit and everything's like, they're like, whoa, this is like, I'm excited. Like it's a new me type.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You ever
I feel like you start to mitigate those risks a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely, once those athletes get the momentum, they kind of silence a lot of those things around is the key.
You said it, momentum. I call it, it's like it's mental momentum, right? Training has gone consistently so well that it becomes a higher priority in their life.
Yeah.
It brings so much order and structure to their life because it continually pays them back.
Yeah.
And so many athletes put themselves and coaches put athletes in positions where that can't happen. And that's the problem. You've got to put athletes in a position to be successful consistently. And when they have that consistent success, most of that crap goes away, guys. It does. It just does. I'd say if an athlete's, came to me and said, I now have an Achilles injury because I wore these heels all night, I'd probably say, well, that Achilles probably was on the edge anyway.
Yeah.
At that point.
That's true.
So if that's all it takes, like it'd be one thing if you're like, it's a little sore, but if that really hurts you and puts you down for a while, you were on the edge anyway. And so many athletes are on that edge. And what happens? Some athletes, they put themselves on that edge and their body can respond for a certain duration and then it breaks down. So their belief is that was the right training because they got so much better. So the problem is the body, not the training. And it's like, no, it's like, that's very, very high risk stuff that you're doing, that you have to have an approach that supports that to make sure that it doesn't all fall down like a house of cards. And when that happens, it's, devastating. And I see it time and time again. When an athlete consistently has success, I believe that every single one of us, athletes especially in sport, it's that when they reach a certain metric threshold, they change as an athlete. And that certain metric threshold is personal to them. What I mean by that is it could be something as simple as their neighborhood run loop. You guys have a neighborhood run loop that you like to do. You know how fast you run that. You know exactly how fast. And if one day you run it and you're like, that was really fast and I wasn't trying, all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I'm fit. And now you got this excitement, right? Now you're moving forward with everything that you do to be, that much more enthusiastic because you recognize that where you're at, or you see that improvement as it comes. But for some athletes, it's a certain result at a race. Hey, I qualified for Kona. Now I really am one of the best in the world, in my age group, or, I can win all my local races now, whatever. But there's some sort of metric for me, it was weight when I was an athlete. I knew when I went 160 pounds at 6'2", I was ready. I could expect to run into like, okay, here we go. I was lean. My wife's
a lean machine.
Yeah, wow.
my wife told me I just look kind of normal now. I was not healthy back then, but it's like the 160 pounds means nothing to most people. To me, that was the number. Thought, boom, I'm ready. Like, just need that. I'm good. Let's go. And people have it in their daily lives, in their jobs. Once I make this amount of money, I'm set. I'm a different person. My life's different. I'm going to live my life differently because I'm now make this much compared to what I used to make. Or, boy, now I'm a CEO. So, oh boy, now I own my own business. Now I got this promotion. Now I'm a manager. Boy, this has been my, where I've always wanted to be in this company, or some. It's like they change. And when people change, it's amazing how their focus and their priorities change and the confidence they bring to things. And when you bring confidence to the start line against great competition, you do a lot better. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because you're not waiting for things to go wrong. You're expecting things to go right. And you can handle stuff. You don't bring in new thoughts or doubts or fears. You don't create problems anymore. Mm-hmm. And that's where athletes need to go. Some athletes don't have the patience to build that over time. And unfortunately, they probably won't experience that as well as they could.
And I would say a big part. So it's hard to even know how to follow that because so well said.
Mic drop, end of podcast.
That was a mic drop moment. But a big part of that we didn't even touch on is food and nutrition. And sometimes people even talk about that being, the fourth discipline in triathlon of especially, and I'll say even especially in the Ironman distances, like if you're not eating enough, you can do all the other things and it's going to fall down on you. I'd love to know a little bit, are all your athletes in ketosis? What do you think about fat adaptation? Or what is your general approach to nutrition? You have an athlete, you seem like a very holistic style approach. What does the food conversation look like as the coach athlete conversation goes?
It's a great question. Here's one thing I've learned about food and food tastes and things. People's relationship with food is very emotional. It's very emotional. So I don't want to overeat because I might look fat. I want to fit in these jeans and hey, I'm the same. Trust me, I got skinny jeans in here. My wife reminds me about them all the time.
From your 160 days.
Just so people know, I'm not saying, I know people think, oh, he's talking about women. No, I'm talking about me too. All right. So, but there's religious attachments to food, to certain foods. There's ethical attachments to food. It is an emotional connection. And quite honestly, you're not dealing with food, you're dealing with emotions. Because if it's simple, just a math numbers and calculating, hey, here's how many calories you need, it shouldn't be a problem. I know exactly what's the demands of the race. Here's the workouts we got to do and what we got to be able to hold over certain durations. What's the caloric demand? This is what you need to take in. It's not that hard. Yes, you need to find ways to support that and break it down. But in general, it is a basic principle, but people are so emotionally connected to it that you have to be very, very careful as a coach. And so I'll be honest, I give very numeric basic numbers. I talk very in ways that I know that I stay in my lane. And if an athlete wants more, I'm just very honest. I'm like, I think you'd be better off seeking someone that, more qualified to answer these questions and assess your diet than me. I give some advice of, hey, here's what I want you to do. Here's how I want to do this. But believe it or not, I'm not really involved in Kanute's nutrition, not race nutrition, not daily nutrition. Unless he's here on a training camp and we finish the workout at my house, then I make him, a meal, and we talk about the workout and things. That's about the end. But generally I open up my fridge and offer him what I got, so it's, That's how it is. And believe it or not, that I'm that way in a lot of ways about so much. Like, I'm not a bike fitter. We go to Parik with Cyclologic, who has I mean, that guy, in my opinion, is the best in the world at what he does. And his aerodynamics measurements and software that he sends us before races so we can plan out. Like, I can't share it with you guys, but it's freaking incredible what he does. He's based out of Scottsdale, so he's that. I have Bobby McGee, who's my run mechanics. He does a lot of mech analysis, breaks down everything we do, looks for flaws in Ben's technique that I can't see. He communicates that to Pendola. Pendola knows and understands, okay, here's the muscles that are actually either not activated or not strong enough for this movement and this thing, or they're not, there's not enough mobility. So he does that. I really work in a team. I really do. And, all of Ben's success is not just Jim Vance and Ben. It's a lot of people. All my athletes, I try to be that way. And for a long time, we've had this belief that's been kind of pushed out of what's it called, DTEs, daily training environments, where you got to have this coach hands-on, and they got to do this and that, and everyone feeds off each other and gets better. It's like, yeah, kumbaya, everybody's singing that. And it's like, no, here's the truth about DTEs. They're always dominated by the alpha. And if you're not the alpha, then the workouts aren't designed for you. They're designed for the alpha in the group, the person who's going to bring the group the most success, the most money for the coach, whatever. You can see this in certain athletes. They do well when they're an alpha, and then they go to a group. Maybe they change a sport and they go to a group where they're not the alpha, and suddenly they don't have that success. Okay. So you've got to really understand when you're putting an athlete in an environment, what is the support that they get? How is that, how's the team around them? Okay. Because athletes shouldn't be going to DTEs with a number of other athletes. They need to establish their own DTE. And that's what we do with Kanute. We have all this support, and there's no decisions on, well, okay, Ben needs to work on this, but this athlete needs to work on that. So we'll do a workout in the middle that meets for both needs somewhat. It's like, no, Ben does 100% of the work that is 100% towards his goals. And when he wants other people involved, we bring them in. And that's what we do. And I think so many athletes, again, too, they oh, what are those guys doing? Oh, they're training hard. I'm going to go train with them. And then they're back in that cycle of beating themselves down, training by peer pressure, not their own goals, not progressing. They're just starting wherever those other athletes are. It's like, you didn't progress to that point. You weren't ready. And it's no wonder it doesn't work. So it really is about setting your own environment, having a team around you that supports you and your goals.
Is there any sort of strength training as a part of the sort of A team that you surround yourself with? What does that look like in terms of what you program for your athletes?
Sure. With Kanute, we have Matt Pendola. He also works with me with Annie, and I also have some of his work with another athlete that I have, Brittany Higgins, pro, who got 4th in Brazil for me just in May. Ironman
She's
Brazil.
from Florida, right?
Yeah. And so she's been using them as well. Some of their more publicly available options. They with Ben and Annie, it's probably a bit more intensive things, but I believe a lot in what Pendola does in his stuff. If I have an athlete that just needs some more general guidance and things, then I have a strength coach that I've worked with long before I met Pendola, that we kind of designed some programming where I just have it based on more foundational work, more competition season work, and then kind of that transition time. So, where foundational work, we're working on a lot more basic strength, functional movements, things like that. Competition phase, we bring down the intensity, we stay a bit more sharp, try not to lose what we've gained. So, and I try to give a little, there's specific guidance in those hip hinge movements and things like that, certain things. But yeah, it's a little bit different approach. Yeah.
And how about heat training and heat adaptation, and like leaning into a race like Kona? What would that look like in your coaching style?
Oh, good question. We have some protocols that we follow. It's a balance too of how hot it is. And because believe it or not, like when Kanute's telling me, like, Jim, I don't have to even go outside to get heat training. I can stay in the house and do a trainer set, and trust me, I'll get heat adaptation that's not as hot as outside, but still good enough. Mm-hmm. So you got to time it with that and understand how hot it is, how humid it is, because that affects too when can you do a quality workout in heat? You don't have to do quality workouts in heat. You can do all your basic or easy aerobic efforts in heat. You're going to get a lot of adaptation. So you kind of have to assess risk, right? With that athlete and availability. Not all athletes have the ability to finish a workout and go sit in a sauna for 30 minutes. If they do, great. Kanute can do that. Some pros can do that. Age groupers, like, no, I got to finish this workout, hop off the trainer, get in the shower, be to the table in time for dinner with the family or something like that. So, yeah, you really got to look at it. But you can adapt to heat in as little as about 2 weeks or less with some just some basic work in the heat. Mm-hmm.
So as we wrap up,
there's a lot more protocol to that, and I'm very generalizing. I don't want to go through and say it, but I'm trying to give the lay person who's listening to this, the age grouper is like, man, how do I prep for the heat? It's like, do your good workouts in cooler temps, make them successful. Go take your easy workouts, especially if you're targeted. But hey, these are like my 2 big days of the week. The rest of the days are all easy. Do all your easy days in the heat, or 4 of the 5 easy days, or 3, and progress that, and it'll probably go pretty well.
And do you more do that in your final like 3 or 4 kind of weeks, or is there a time period out from the race that you start to introduce that?
Yes, 3 weeks out, you really need to start. If you again, it depends on how hot it is where you are, and how you're going to balance it, how hot it's going to be at the race relative to where you are currently. Kanute, that's the hard thing. He's in Phoenix where it's so hot, but it's dry heat. But now the monsoons are coming, so now it's going to get humid. So that may actually be helpful. Whereas, he's trying to prep for Singapore. But I mean, he's up at 4:30 and out the door by 5 to run, and it's 90 degrees at 5 a.m. So dry heat.
I took us a final question from me. I took us on a different path because of your mic drop answer, but I just want to wrap up a bow in terms of the run. I know that you talked about the fact that you keep it relatively low mileage, like 70 miles a week. It doesn't seem like you're cranking out high intensity, high volume, which is as you, and I'm going to already probably give the answer. You work with the athlete's goals. But is there any sort of philosophy outside of just keeping it consistent, low mileage? I know that Ben uses walk breaks during, his races. Is there any sort of
his practice runs? Not runs. I've never seen him walk in a race.
We're in some trouble.
A slip. I know he doesn't.
Let's hope not. Anyways.
Thank you for the correction. During his running. So talk to us a little bit about that.
You're right. The walk breaks are the big things. I think most athletes think that's silly. And in fact, I pretty much have to be very honest when I start with an athlete. I'm like, if you're not willing to run walk, I'm not your coach. Because that tells me that your idea of training is based on ego, not based on learning and doing things right. You want to be right, not get it right. And that's a big difference. And so, yeah, I think there's that. I also do a lot of, how should I say this? Yes, we do walk breaks. We do runs where we will run continuously, like off the bike in a transition run. Maybe I want this, suddenly if an athlete's been walking a lot, and now I have them come off a 70.3 bike and run 45 minutes continuous easy, that's a new stressor for them. So again, progression of load, I think, is key. You know, I also coach cross country here, Francis Parker High School starting. And, you know, I do a lot of slowing kids down, slow them down. You can't do that many hard workouts. I know so many kids, it's like in high school that I see it's 3 hard workouts and a meet in a week. And I'm just like, you can't do that. You're like, that just doesn't work. And they're so beat down. This one young man that I started coaching, I looked at his results from the year before. I said, you peaked in March. He probably came in and I said, here's everything that probably happened in the weeks leading into that or after that. You felt this way, you noticed this, you noticed that, you noticed this. He's like, you hit the nail on the head. How'd you know that? I said, I can see it in your results. You came in way hot and everything went to crap. It's like, you gotta pick the day on the calendar that you really want to be good at. And you gotta prep for that. You gotta be patient, play the long game, get there, have success, improve your execution. And when you do that, you get to the big meets. No surprise, by the time this kid got to the CIF finals here in San Diego, he ran 4:18 for the mile, big PR, and his best executed race ever. And I was like, that's showing up on the day that it matters the most with the best that you can do, your execution and your expression of fitness. So anything I can do to support that helps. Fractionalizing, progression of load. Those are the 2 areas that are missing. And believe it or not, this is one of my, so I now am the head of education for 80/20 endurance. And Matt Fitzgerald is one of the guys. He wrote the book 80/20 Endurance.
Love that book.
Yeah. So, and he's got his whole course that we offer now. And that's where I'm coming in, because one of my passions is coach education, because I see a lot of bad mistakes that affect people's lives in negative ways. And I'm pissed about it in a lot of ways. Like this is not how we should operate. We need a lot more professionalism. But the problem too is everyone's only ever learned from everyone before them that's done all that. Oh, this is what you do. It's like, no, we got to stop that. That's really, I think, what set me apart is I didn't just try to do what everybody else did. Because I was a pro and I realized I was not the best pro, I was always looking for loopholes. What can I do to beat my competition? They're all doing that. Is that really the best way? There's got to be a better way. And so that's what led to that. That brought new challenges, brought me Kanute, who was like, hey, Jim, I want to win a gold medal or a medal at the Olympics in the mixed relay, and I want to be 70.3 world champ in the same year. It's like, well, that's pretty hard to do. Okay. No one's ever done that. We'll have to learn. But with coach education, I think so often too, as a coach, when I go to a conference, there's somebody who stands up on a stage and talks in vague generalities because they don't want to be wrong. You know, and they just want to talk, well, it depends, this or that. I realize I'm guilty of that on this podcast as well with some of my answers. Sorry. But I did. The one thing that I do though, is I talk about the things and the decisions that I make and my rules and my philosophies that I build around, that every coach and every athlete can go and take and use in their daily training or their approach to what they do. That's what's missing in coach education. That's what's missing in our sport. We need to have guys come up, and I've offered to do this at a conference, and we'll see if they allow me to. I said, I'll get up on stage. I'll tell you what we did with Kanute. I'll show you. Here's the decisions we made. Here's why we made those decisions. Here's the challenges we faced. Here's how we had to go about it. Here's the progression of his training and the load. Here's, like, I think so many people think, you know, that it's, oh, these guys all train at 1,000,000 miles an hour at 1,000,000 TSS every week, if that's their number or metric that they're on. But that's not really how it is in the real world. And all these general things like, okay, as my mom used to say, when she'd have a young person come into the company and they'd say, well, I have an MBA. And she'd tell them, well, then I better show you how to do this. You know? because
I love your mom.
Yes, they have this, I know all the philosophies of this or that. Yeah, but you don't know the hands-on. You don't know how to make a decision when an athlete asks you a question that you don't know the answer to. And but you got to have a decision. You got to figure out a strategy, critical thinking skills, decision making. You got to have a philosophy, an approach. You got to have patience. And that's what's missing in coach education nowadays. And yeah, so that's why I'm jumping into that. And that's what I'm trying to do and share, like, hey, here's some things that you can take and do in your daily coaching to make your athletes more successful and their lives better.
Is there, when you look back on your coaching, is there like one philosophy that you can think of that you had in the past that you like changed your kind of thought on, and maybe what was it, if you're willing to share?
Yeah. I'll give you a perfect example. When I first started coaching swimming, they gave us high school swimming too. They gave us a 2-hour window at the pool. So what did I do? I filled the 2 hours. Then I got hired over at another school that had a lot more support, and its own 50-meter pool on campus, Coronado High School here, beautiful place. I still train there all the time with Kanute and Annie, still on deck there. Now love that place. Get there, they're like, you only got 90 minutes. Well, all of a sudden now, 90 minutes from the time practice start, explain what we're doing, get all our announcements, get attendance, get in the water, everything. Actually, you learn to streamline stuff. Suddenly, I wasn't trying to do as much volume. When I wasn't doing much volume, what did I do? I focused on quality. I focused more on skills. Team did better. Team did a lot better, a lot more success. And I started realizing it's not about volume. It's not about volume. It's not about doing more. It's about doing what's right and what's needed. And, if you can do that, then you'll go a long way in endurance sports for sure.
Love that. Well said. Final question I have before kind of our wrap up question is, what are some of the things or resources that you use to continue to up your game as a coach? Like, is there certain mentors or certain resources or conferences that you use that are really, because you don't seem like somebody who's just sitting there and not improving. You definitely seem like a self-improvement type of person.
Well, like I have Bobby McGee on my staff. I pay him a decent amount of money every month. So, so that I can have a sounding board, so that I can, as a mentor. I've known Bobby for, 18 years. So, really through a lot. And yeah, just learning from him. He has a wealth of experience at the highest level and with age groupers. He's got running, he was super successful with. So he's the one who introduced me to Pendola. That changed a lot of my philosophy. Pendola really did a lot more to bring in new things, like me making sure that the nervous system is turned on, stimulus is high for that. So things have changed a lot. I've constantly adapted, and I try to put myself in positions to learn from guys like that. I have a book that my dad gave me that I think is wonderful. It's no, I didn't write it. No, I won't make anything off this, but it's called Coaching Athletes to Be Their Best.
I have it right in the back there.
This book is phenomenal. It is absolutely phenomenal.
I actually haven't got around to reading it yet. It's next on my list.
So what it is so my dad is now he's a retired social worker, but he was a drug and alcohol rehab therapist for women in the criminal justice system in Brooklyn, New York. So you can imagine that's quite a population to engage with on a daily basis. But these are therapy techniques and a lot of addiction therapy techniques where athletes come to you and say something, but you want them to, if you want them to have change, you need to inspire them to be the change. That the change and the desire to change comes from them, not from you as the therapist, or in this case, the coach. And so again, like this is that thing where getting athletes to reframe their thinking, understand what they're doing, asking them questions to draw from them, their experience, how they're feeling, what their fears are. And it's incredible. Like, it's very, very hard to do. I mean, my dad has a master's in social work from Columbia. He's good at this. I'm a triathlon coach. Like, I don't have the same skill set. Okay. So, but I mean, those are, to me, that's the skill that you have to have. You've got to be able to talk to people and really understand and get them to go from this point to that point without you having to push them or be the physical force of it. They need to be that. And so I think I'm trying to include that more and more in what I do. The feedback that I give, you know, a small example, I really get bothered with myself when I tell an athlete, good job or great work. It's like, no, that's me giving them praise. That's not, it shouldn't be about me approving. It should be me reinforcing that, hey, the work they did and the decisions they've made, they're paying off for them. That's what I need to focus on telling them as feedback. And so I would encourage any coaches who's listening to this, coaching athletes to be their best, motivational interviewing in sports. And these people are therapists, and they just applied everything from that into coaching. So
I need to get cracking on that book then. It sounds awesome.
It's addicting. I've read it. I'm on the 4th time.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because I just come back, and you'll go through scenarios where you're like, man, I should have used this. This would have been great back then. Now I know it. You know, and you'll catch on.
Cool. Love it. I feel like that's a great spot to wrap up on our coaching chat here. So what we always wrap up our conversation with is our podcast is called Endurance Icons, and we brought you on because you're one of our endurance icons. So who is your endurance icon, Jim?
Oh, wow. God, it's changed over time.
You can have multiple as well. That's cool too.
You know, I was pretty blessed as an athlete coming up. You know, my 3 triathlon coaches were Greg Welch, Peter Reed, and Joe Friel.
Oh, no. Wow. What a lineup. Okay.
So I would say that's almost a Mount Rushmore in the sport right there to a degree.
Yeah.
Of endurance sports. So I was pretty lucky to learn from those guys. And they all had very, very different styles, very, very different approaches. Peter Reed, one guy who kind of helped set it all off, though, told me, Jim, most people overtrain for Ironman. And that's so there.
That's still true.
Still true. It's funny.
Amazing. Wow. 3 great choices. I feel like your name is very much in that company these days too. So it's amazing what you've done, and pumped to continue to follow your journey. For people that want to follow along with your journey or get in contact with you, what are the best avenues to do so?
Sure. CoachVance.com's my website. Obviously 80/20 endurance. I would say I'm on Instagram, Coach Jim Vance. You know, I share a lot more there. I've kind of gotten off Twitter or X or whatever the heck it's called now. I think I'm about done with that, which is unfortunate, but it's just, Instagram's probably where I'm at least the most active if people want to engage with me.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much again, Jim, for taking so much time out of your day to chat with us. I think our listeners are going to love this one. Lots of good information. So thanks again for chatting with us.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry if I was long-winded.
No, there was so much good info in there. No apology needed at all. We loved it.
Wow. How great was that? I always learned so much from these endurance icons. If you enjoyed the podcast as well, please consider liking us across social media, subscribing to us on YouTube, or giving us a 5-star rating on wherever you listen to your podcasts. We appreciate you and your support so much. We wish you happy training, and we'll see you back next week.